Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Golf Pupanich, and I have my host here, my co-host Ryan John today, and we're going to talk about money-wise, money saving tips. Maybe some hacks, that we can share with our viewers today. Ryan, tell us about yourself with your background.
Yeah. Kind of a legal background initially. I spent some years practicing law and in business disputes and insurance litigation. Most recently, but for the past decade or so, I've been in the financial world. So I see a lot of people's household expenses and budgets, and have some insights into what people experience in terms of inflation and rising expenses and different things like that. So.
Perfect. And some of you might know me. I come from a mortgage background, so we see these things every day with inflation going up for year over year. And we wanted to share some tips that we can with our viewer, ways that we can potentially drive in some more revenue, or maybe cost saving tips. At the end of the day, is we all have the same 24 hours. And it's how you spend those 24 hours to make it more impactful for yourself or your family, so.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to take a step back too and go, well, what is inflation? Without getting into a real detailed explanation of it, but we hear it on the news almost every day, or at least every couple of weeks now.
And we all see it, right? Anywhere from, the simple bag of chips that you used to buy a year ago, there's a lot more air in it today than they were a year or two ago.
Shrinkflation, they talk about too, like the product's getting smaller.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, it just means that we're spending more money.
Correct.
Prices have gone up. And then at the same time, if you're an employee, it doesn't necessarily mean that your employer was able to increase your wages. Most people's wages have not kept up with inflation.
Correct.
I don't know the number, but I would assume it's like 90% or more of workers, their wages haven't kept pace with inflation. And then even business owners, we talk about business owners, and there's reasons why those wages haven't increased lots of times. It's because depending upon the business you're in, your revenue isn't necessarily keeping up with inflation, especially for service-oriented entities. Now, we can get into whether business owners should be raising their rates, et cetera. But the point is whether you're an employee or a business owner, you're probably feeling a squeeze at home or even in your business.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we were talking about. We say, okay, everyone's dealing with it. So let's talk about some ideas, some hacks, as we like to call them, to what could you do practically to look at your situation and kind of reduce that feeling of a squeeze when it comes to expenses.
Right. Well, some of the stuff that I've seen that people are doing and my clients are doing, for example, using real estate. So I'm in the real estate aspect of it. Having, house hack by renting out some rooms out. That could be potentially, if you have rooms that you're not using, or even there's services. If you have room in your garage that you can rent out, and then people can store their junk or whatever they have in your garage. And you can get that revenue into to increase your bottom line. And there are good ways or smart ways to do it. Obviously you want to, if you're going to decide to rent a room out or something like that, you want to vet the people that's going to be in your house, right? So
I think that's very smart, and maybe that's in some ways that's kind of on the legal side of things too. Is like, if you're a renter at an apartment complex, before you go down that road and start subleasing to offset your rent, check your lease and make sure it allows you to sublease.
Correct.
What you don't want to do is get into trouble with your landlord and cause a problem there and fines and whatever.
Right.
But make sure it's in your lease, and then behave like a landlord. When you rented that apartment or that house, that landlord probably asked you all sorts of questions, maybe even ran a credit report. So be careful who you select. Don't just grab your friend who's like, hey, I'm having trouble too, and I'm out of a job. Can I come sublease? No, you have to have good standards, right?
Absolutely.
Unapologetically, you have to say like, no, I'm a landlord, even if it's just that room in my apartment.
Right.
And so because of that, I'm going to make sure I get a proper sublease document lined up. I'm sure LegalZoom has offerings like that you could check out, and then develop, research. Won't get into it today, but research different factors that you need to consider in deciding whether somebody's financially stable enough to continue to pay you your rent.
Right.
right? But I think that's a great idea because it's taking assets that you already have available to yourself. You know, the garage example as well as the subleasing, and you say, well, let me get some money for this.
Right. On the other aspect of it, I mean, what can someone do on their bottom line? All right. I mean, that's just one avenue of bringing in, increasing your revenue. What about cost saving tips? What are some cost saving tips that you can advise us?
Sure. And I think before we even get to like those details, you'd say, well, how do you know what costs you have in your budget that you can reduce? The place that everybody has to start is taking an inventory and understanding what they're spending. And most people that I encounter are not tracking their budget. Why is that?
I'm guilty of that. So,
hey, look, it is not fun.
Right.
It's tedious. For the most part, it can be very tedious. Like if you're talking about, our parents used to do it in their checkbook. I meet a lot of people now that don't ever write a check. Right? So they're not balancing their checkbook. If you say balance your checkbook to somebody under 30 years old, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right.
Correct.
And you and I hear that term and we're like, oh yeah, mom and dad used to balance their checkbook. Well, I don't write checks. Right. I think I know where my checkbook is.
Right.
I think I do. But anyway, the point is like, that's tedious. That's slow. So you could do it on an Excel spreadsheet, but the idea is you need to know what you're spending. And a lot of people will be surprised. A lot of people don't want to know what they're spending on eating out because we know we're probably overspending, but we don't want to see that number, right? But that's where it starts. You have to understand what you're spending before you can identify the hack, like what you can implement, right? So take stock first. Now, there's some easier ways to do it. There's applications out there like Mint or Credit Karma, I think, has a budgeting tool. There's one out there called You Need a Budget. And these are different, call them aggregators, where you can connect your accounts and it can help provide some analysis of your spending. Now, there's some work that has to be done too to go in there and identify the expenses and really make sure it's accurate to your expenses, to your spending. But there are easier ways to do it than just writing it down on paper. But that's stop number one. You gotta know what you're spending.
And like I said, a lot of us might be guilty of this stuff by not tracking. And a lot of saying, people you might have heard before is, we don't plan to fail. We fail to plan.
Right.
And, I think if we all can do that, one, take inventory. My biggest tip I would recommend is that, for anyone that wants to come down this journey and have a better odds of success is to make the activity, make it fun. Bring your family in. Make it fun and celebrate those small wins. Some of the stuff that I would recommend, if once we know where we're starting, where our baseline is, and if you're going to have a goal, for example, we can do a small goal like, okay, hey, if we're going to save X amount of money by, let's say, 90 days, 6 months, and it could be a simple thing as like, hey, we'll go have ice cream or something, and celebrate those small wins as you're going with your journey. Again, bringing the family involved with the kids and stuff like that. And then maybe when you get to a bigger amount of savings, you can go maybe take a small vacation, and do make it fun. Yeah,
and you're touching on two really important aspects that I like there. One is getting the kids involved. Now, you don't necessarily have to tell your kids that you're in debt. Like, you don't have to...
Right, you don't want to scare them.
Yeah, and some parents are hesitant to communicate that level of detail because, well, what if they talk to so-and-so's parents? So you don't have to get to that level, but you can have goals where you say, hey, mom and dad are working towards saving a certain amount of money. And because that's why we can't go to Outback tonight, because we're going to save this. So it can help them understand. So you're teaching your kids about money management.
Correct.
Just by watching you. And that's the best way to plan, right?
Right.
So that's a really important aspect, I think, of what you just said. And then the second thing is just like that goal setting and that motivation. So you're bringing the kids in to help teach them. But then that goal setting, how do you get through the budget and doing all those tedious things if you don't have something that's pushing you? You have to know the why, or else we're going to stagnate. We're going to just stop, right?
Right.
Because what's the easiest thing to do?
To do nothing.
To do nothing. You just sit there and go, well, my budget really stinks and those credit card bills are going up, and it's like, I'm just going to sit on the couch and get McDonald's, right?
Right.
So, well, let me ask you, like, as you're thinking about the budget and like let's not eat out, and what are some practical things that you think of that can help you plan ahead, right? Instead of failing to plan, like what would you do to help avoid eating out too much or something like that?
I mean, some of us, I mean, I'm guilty of this too, is like, by not planning ahead, like, meal prep, for example, right? And we know we can meal prep, maybe, save money during the week. I know when I don't meal prep, for example, I come home, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And by then, my wife calls, oh, you're hangry, right? So it's easier for the mindset to just like, all right, let's grab the keys and we're going down to Outback or something like that, right? So if you were able to meal prep or kind of plan, my ideal week is, for example, I like personally, if anyone that knows me, I'm a foodie. I like to grill out and stuff like that on the weekend. So usually if I grill out on Friday, usually I have enough food for maybe Monday and Tuesday and have leftovers. So at least that takes care of it 2 days of the week. So
yeah, and I think, a lot of times people talk about meal prepping, and you see it on like whatever the health blogger is that you follow, or somebody from that's really into CrossFit or something. It's like, oh, I got a food prep, and it is really good from a health standpoint. But from a budgeting standpoint, it's powerful,
right?
Because you get everything put together. You say, we're going to shop on Saturday, we're going to food prep on Sunday, and we're going to have food available for the week. So when you get to Thursday and the kids have had a tough week, they're in school, or maybe you don't have kids, but you just have so many activities that you've been at work all week, and you get home on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock, and the easiest thing to do is to pick up Burger King or whatever. Chick-fil-A. Like now there's a health component there, but at the same time, you're going to go spend $15 on a dinner when you probably, if you had the stuff prepared, you'd spend $3 or $4
right
total. So meal prepping is a hack. I think it's a financial hack for sure.
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind for me, now this isn't food related at all, but one thing that comes to mind for me as you're looking at that budget once you've dialed it in is to take inventory and go, well, what am I spending money on regularly? And we think about a couple things. Subscriptions.
Yeah.
Are we using them? Like, what are you paying for? And I've seen a lot of ads lately from, who is it? Is it Rocket?
Rocket Bunny. Oh, yeah.
Rocket. Yeah,
Rocket
I think
Bunny,
they're showing, they're like, we can find your subscriptions and make sure you're
cancel it for you.
Paying
yes.
double.
Right.
I mean, that's huge, because if you're not monitoring your budget and you connected your bank account or your credit card to some subscription service a couple years ago, is it still running? Like, Are you monitoring that? How do you know? So look at those recurring expenses and trim the fat if you can.
Yeah. I mean, this is not me, but I mean, I don't know how many of you made New Year resolution and joined the gym, and we're now the end of May. Are you going to the gym? Are you using that service? If you're not, you need to come to Jesus and say, hey, either I'm going to get back on the wagon and start working out, or I'm going to cancel it, right? So
yeah, and that's tough, right? Because we do this in other areas of our life too, where it's like, no, I'm going to keep that pair of pants because I'm going to fit into those. And so just get rid of them. Look, what are you doing, right? Well, the gym thing's a little bit the same. Like, yeah, you should have aspirations and you need to be healthy. But if you're not using it, it's costing you $50 a month or whatever it is.
Right.
What do you need to focus on? If you need to get the financial house in order, then you might need to cut that out and just go for a run. Right. Another thing kind of along the same lines to me, just because it's recurring expenses, is like insurance. And that can be a big ticket item, right? You look at auto insurance or homeowners insurance, shop those around, like at least once a year. Now I've got an insurance agent that I use. A lot of people go direct, but I lean on my agent. I will call her and check in and be like, hey, it's, and sometimes they'll call me like, hey, it's that time of year. And we shop it around to make sure we're not overpaying. And now an important piece of that is I'm not telling you to call up your auto insurance company and reduce your coverage down to next to nothing. Right. So that you can, that's you need to talk to your insurance agent about that to make sure you have the right coverages. But from a budgetary standpoint, auto insurance and homeowners insurance, or renters if you have it, those are big pieces of the puzzle that are recurring. Mm-hmm. And so if you can dial those back a little bit, that will help you every month.
Right. And make sure you, when that renewal comes and stuff like that, make sure that you are in your best, potentially shape of when that time comes. A lot of people I ask, since I'm in the mortgage space, are not aware that, by having good credit can improve your cost saving with insurance, right? I mean, if you're reckless of paying your bills and stuff like that, and your scores tend to be on the lower, the premium is going to reflect it. So I would advise, before you talk to your broker, make sure that you look at yourself in the mirror. What are you doing to make yourself ready to potentially take on that savings?
Yeah. Again, that's planning.
Absolutely.
Right? Instead of failing to plan, that's just planning. Like make sure you're on top of it, right?
Right.
And, another thing that I hear people talk about, it's like, oh, you need to save money? Well, why don't do you have a membership to Costco or Sam's? Like,
right.
are you buying in bulk?
Right.
And I don't know. That doesn't apply to everybody. I mean,
it probably wouldn't apply for like a single person, right? I mean, but on average, right, let's say a family of 4, I think that you can take advantage of that.
Yeah, and there's certain areas that it makes sense. Like I know, so in my family, my wife and I, we have 3 kids. There's certain things that we might buy at a wholesale store like that, and other things we won't because we're going to use it or we're not, right? If you're a single individual, it doesn't make sense to go buy 2 gallons of olive oil when you probably need that little one. You're just cooking for yourself. Or you should be cooking, not going out to eat, like you're saying.
Right.
But it doesn't make sense for everybody. But you can save money doing that.
Right, right. I shop at a wholesale because I'm a family of 4 on a weekly basis. Sometimes, even maybe twice a week because I have grown boys and they're both in sports.
Teenagers,
right? I mean, that the conversation that someone tell me, they're eating you out of house and home. I mean, it's a real
it's a struggle.
It's a struggle, right? What I wanted to share with our viewers is, while we're talking about wholesale club, is have you ever went to Publix and then grab a bag of chips? I'm guilty of it because like during football season, which is coming up here, I like enjoying having chips with watching football and stuff like that. And if you ever go buy anything at a bag of chips at Publix, there's sure is a lot of air in it. And so, I buy my chips at the warehouse where we're definitely getting more value for our money there.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's definitely certain things that it makes more sense to buy wholesale than otherwise.
Right.
You were mentioning like goal setting and looking at vacations and stuff earlier, and I know you guys have done some stuff locally. Like, so when you're talking about like planning your vacation and saying, well, hey, I still want to live. You guys are talking about all this budgeting stuff. I don't want to have no life.
Correct.
So I'm trying to be excited about this, but you're telling me to keep a budget. I don't like it. So if you've got a vacation in mind, what are your thoughts around changing that up a little bit to make it sure it's still manageable, but your family can still do something?
Right. Here's some of the things that, we live in sunny Florida, right? I mean, what people say, we live where you vacation. And taking that to another level is that there's so many things that we can do if you're able to, dial down your budget, instead of the money that we're saving and go splurge it on, let's say a cruise or something like that, right? There's places that you can do here locally and still have fun and same effect. One, I mean, obviously going to the beaches, we have beautiful beaches here and you can go there, free, do a picnic, pack your lunch and stuff like that. Another saving tip that I learned recently is Weeki Wachee, for example, going to these springs. There are a lot of beautiful springs in the surrounding Florida area. And one day, not that recently, I took my wife on our 20th anniversary and we went kayaking in Weeki Wachee and, enjoying being out with nature. It was very next to nothing as far as cost wise. And it was only a 45-minute drive from my house. And we spent the day out there and that was, was great.
Yeah. And I think too, like if you're listening to this and you're going, that sounds really nice, but I really like cruising. I want to do cruises or I want these big trips. And so it can be difficult sometimes to get motivated to dial it back because I want to experience these things now. And, they talk about younger people are more experience focused as opposed to maybe asset focused, right? And I get that. So how do you stay motivated to do that? Well, you have to have some kind of connection to the future. Like you need to be looking forward and saying, well, why am I doing this? Just like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
So these adjustments can be temporary. They're not forever, but
Right.
you're setting yourself up in the future to be able to do the things you want to do now and more. So again, just keeping your eyes on the prize and understanding the why
Right.
you're making these adjustments in the short term, right?
Right. I think setting the small goals, right? Small wins. Whether and then you got to be able to again celebrate and look back at how far you have come. You know, whether we do it like a 30-day look back,
That's
90-day, or a 6-month look back. Say, hey, you know, maybe put something like on a little chart on your refrigerator. Hey, if we're able to save X, you know, we're gonna go do that kayaking trip or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. We talked about celebrating the victories, but having something visual, like in the kitchen or something, and it could be for different purposes. Some people are dealing with debt, like student debt or credit cards, and maybe the phase that you're in right now is you got to get this budget so that you can properly get rid of your debt.
Correct.
And other people are saying, you know, I'm debt free, but I live paycheck to paycheck, and so those goals are maybe more vacation oriented.
Right.
But having something on the calendar for the family to say, here's where we're headed.
Right, right. No, I mean, you know, that's the fun side thing. I mean, you know, sometimes, you know, by having the savings, you know, they're using that money to pay down your debt could be, you know, a good avenue as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, what we know is if you've got monthly payments on debt and you're able to kill those off, you're improving your cash flow
Right,
for the future, meaning
Right.
you're going to have more margin between your expenses and your income. So
right.
that's a whole nother episode. We can talk about debt. That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
One thing I would add, I think we've covered a lot of it.
Yeah,
But one thing I would add, just to kind of loop back to what I said at the beginning, which is the first place you start is the budget, right?
right.
You have to understand what you're spending. And so you think of the budget as kind of like, maybe that's a monthly average. You go, on average, here's what we spend a month, and here's our income. And we're either spending more or less. And so what are we going to do about it, right? And then you brought up a really good point, which is like, you have to monitor your progress along the way. So that's a little bit of a different document in a way. You've got your budget that you say, here's what we spend on average, and then track what you actually spend. And then the second thing is that budget, if you keep it well, will allow you to project into the future and plan and say, okay, we know our expenses. And so next month, this is what it should look like.
Right.
And if you understand that, then you start to understand that the margin that you have, those extra dollars, where do they go? So you cut your expenses, but now what do we do with the savings?
Right.
And then you get to that point, you go, how did we do, to your point? How did we do? How do we do this month compared to last month, compared to the month before? Are we better off? Have we paid down that debt? Are we 50% of the way towards that cruise or that trip to the Springs? And celebrate it. And then you just keep going,
Right.
keep
right.
moving, right?
Yeah, no, that's some valuable lessons I think we all can take advantage of.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, no, likewise. I mean, like I said, if you like more content like this, Ryan and I is going to be, you know, coming on here, you know, giving life hacks, you know, tips, and that we all can use and share with our viewers. So,
Awesome.
all right.
Appreciate it. Looking
right.
forward to the next one.
Likewise. Pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
All right, bye.